Thank you so much. Wow, it's really great to be here. Once again, my name is Marek Olszewski. It's a real treat. It's my first time in Istanbul, so pretty stoked. So today we're going to be talking about Celo's L2 transition. And we're going to use a lot of emojis today, so if you like the format of the talk, let me know afterwards. You can find me on Twitter at Marek_. Cool. And I wanted to start today with a question. So I like to start my talks with questions. Kind of curious if anybody here has any idea as to what is the most commonly used chain out there today by daily active users? Any guesses? Just yell them out. BSC? It's not BSC. Tron. 2 people said Tron. It is in fact Tron. And it's actually Tron by quite a long shot. And it's maybe a little depressing for us here in the Ethereum community that Ethereum is not at the top. And I added up Ethereum plus all of the different L2s and all of the different daily active users for the whole Ethereum ecosystem. And even then, Tron ends up being out ahead. And that. Why do you guys think that is? Any guesses for what's happening on Tron? Okay, we got fees. We've got people talking about Tether. So Anthony Sassano actually pointed this out recently. He tweeted, there's a lot of payment-related activity happening on Tron. In his words, he's saying that people on Tron are getting real value to real people, right? Tron is offering real value to real people. And I don't know about you, but this makes me sad because, I think what we're all really working really hard to accomplish is, to have kind of this future of people rushing into the Ethereum ecosystem. And instead, it feels like, it's just us having all the fun, right? But we want all those other people too. And, pretty excited to see, Vitalik in his last blog post 2 weeks ago talking a little bit about this as well. He noticed that, there are a lot of different use cases for which people will want to pay different amounts of fees that will require different levels of security. And this will inevitably result in a lot of different types of L2s. And so this makes us at Celo really happy because we're transitioning Celo from an L1 to an L2, and we're specifically targeting those use cases where transaction fees are cheap. And so we're excited that within the Ethereum community, there's excitement for having different types of L2s that are each targeting different levels of security. And so for those of you who maybe have heard of Celo, but you aren't too sure about what makes it unique, just a quick summary. So Celo is an EVM-compatible L1. It's been around for 3.5 years, and it is right now in the process of transitioning to an L2. Celo is really focused on ease of use. So a lot of the same use cases that I think Tron is excelling at. And the way that we do that is by having really great mobile experiences. So in Celo, you can receive payments at your phone number in a privacy-preserving way. We also have a ZK Snark-based-like client that lets you sync the chain with a mobile phone. We can also pay for gas with tokens on Celo. So you can send a stable coin, and you can pay for that transaction fee in that same stable coin. And we can do this without account abstraction. So we don't need smart contract-based wallets. You can do this with an EOA today with multiple different wallets on Celo. And then, as a cherry on top, Celo is the first chain, or was the first chain, to fully offset its carbon emissions. And so we like to say that Celo is carbon negative. It actually offsets more than its carbon emissions. And so that has made also not only a guilt-free place to transact, but also a really cool place for refi protocols to call home. And all of this, I would say, has kind of attracted the types of use cases that we're talking about, these kind of payment, real-world use cases. Over the last year, there's been a huge uptick in active users on Celo. So here's a chart showing daily active users. We've now surpassed the daily active users that we hit during the peak of the last bull market. And so that's been really, really great to see. And if you go back to that same list that I showed you earlier, Celo is a top 10 chain, and on some days it ends up being top 6. And we weren't here as an ecosystem, this time last year. We've been creeping up this ranking over the last year, inch by inch, and it's just been really humbling and rewarding to see. And if you're wondering, what are people using? They're using things like Velora, which is a really easy to use mobile wallet that lets you, again, send value to phone numbers, pay for gas with stable coins. And then they're also using a wallet called MiniPay, which is a pretty cool new offering. It just got released. It's a stablecoin wallet built directly into Opera Mini, which is a browser that you may have heard of, which has about 500 million downloads, roughly 100 million users worldwide, primarily in emerging markets where people are more data sensitive. MiniPay is now slowly being introduced to all of these users as a built-in stablecoin focused wallet that operates exclusively on Celo. And so maybe switching gears a little bit, this talks mostly about the L2 transition, so I wanted to kind of jump into that. With all of these use cases on Celo, there were a number of different kind of constraints that really limited what we could and could not do as we proposed to the community to transition Celo to an L2. And so this ended up resulting in a few kind of constraints that I would say manifested themselves in the form of two goals that we wanted to accomplish for the L2 transition. The first goal was to maintain cheap gas fees. And luckily, in the last year, there's just been a wealth of innovation and exploration around alt DAs. And we think that now's like a really good time for us to make this transition because of all of this new research that's happening. As I'm sure many people here know, given that you're at a data availability event, data availability is what's called in computer science an embarrassingly parallel problem, which means that we can actually parallelize it quite efficiently, which means that we can actually dramatically lower the costs compared to what people are paying today for data availability from their kind of favorite roll-up today. And so that's really great. So I think we have a great story for data availability for the transition. For the second goal, we wanted to maintain decentralization. So Celo is a proof of stake layer 1 that has a very decentralized validator set that's been running the network for the last 3.5 years. And it would be a real shame to just kind of throw that all away and just move into a single sequencer with all of the censorship risks and uptime risks that come with it. It would just feel like a step backwards. And so the solution here is to transition our validator set into a decentralized sequencer set. So for a long time now, people in the rollup and L2 space have been talking about decentralized sequencers. There's been a lot of research that's going into this. And fortunately, we have a lot of the expertise around using cutting-edge BFT-based consensus to accomplish consensus around either blocks or transaction bundles. And in fact, we've been operating these consensus protocols in the Celo network for 3.5 years, production hardened protocols now that have run, for example, with only one production incident over those 3.5 years. And so we've been working hard now since this proposal to transition, again, our validator set into a decentralized sequencer set. Now, our third goal And for those of you who are paying attention, you might notice that that doesn't look like the number 3. And you are correct, but it is the only emoji I could find that remotely looks like number 3. But then secondly, you may, for those of you who are really, really paying attention, you'll remember that I said that there were only 2 goals that we had when thinking about our transition. And that is correct, but as is typical with any big and kind of ambitious computer science problem, you always end up having scope creep. You always end up having things that you didn't think about before that become important. And for us, that manifested itself in the form of this 3rd goal, which was around maintaining one-block finality. So many L2s today are primarily focused on maintaining Ethereum finality, which means that blocks can reorg. And for a lot of the real-world use cases, for a lot of the payment-like focused use cases, we feel that having reorgs is somewhat problematic, right? Like if you're buying something digital on a DEX and that transaction gets rolled back, that's fine because you get whatever you originally paid for back. And so the whole transaction's undone and neither party ultimately loses out. But when you're buying something in the physical world and one of those transactions and that transaction gets rolled back, the physical product that you purchased doesn't go back to the original owner. And so suddenly reorgs can be quite problematic when interacting with the real world. And so we really, really want to maintain one-block finality. And there are 2 sources of reorgs in an L2. The first is the L2 itself. How do you avoid the L2 from reorging? And then the second one is the L1. How do you avoid a reorg happening at the L1 level from impacting the L2? And so we worked really hard to come up with a design that addresses both of these. And the solution for the first one, how do you avoid L2 reorgs? You can use the same exact slashing conditions that many L1s use that offer one-block finality. Celo does this today as well. So if your decentralized sequencer ever equivocates, then you can slash that decentralized sequencer, and then you can have some economic guarantees that they will never do that, and that you have one-block finality. So we can add slashing for equivocation. And then the second thing that you need to do is you need to insulate yourself from reorgs that happen on the L1. And the way to do that, luckily Ethereum has finality. Every 12 minutes, you have a finality gadget that achieves finality. And so if you ensure that all transactions on the L1 that are impacting the L2 accomplish finality before they impact the L2, then any reorg that happens on the L1 won't affect the L2. And so that, in practice, means that all deposits coming from the L1, coming to the L2, have to wait for finality, and then all forced transactions coming from the L1 being forced into the L2 also have to wait for finality. And we think that this is a worthwhile trade-off, waiting 12 minutes, and then getting much better UX at the L2 level is worthwhile. And so, we have a design for how to do that. So how does everything kind of work together? What does it all look like? I have this little example that I can walk through, again, made up of a whole bunch of different emojis. So we have our decentralized sequencer on the left. We have our data availability nodes in the middle. In this example, we just happen to use EigenDA. And then on the right, we have our L2 full nodes. And so as with most chains, in Celo, we have a leader-based election protocol where a leader proposes a new block, or in this case, a new bundle of transactions, because we're just sequencing these transactions for now. That leader then broadcasts those transactions to the other sequencers in the decentralized sequencer. They all sign off using BFT-based consensus on that transaction bundle, and then as soon as 2/3 have signed off, then we end up getting something that looks like a sequencer certificate. You can think of this as a multisig, BLS signatures that have been aggregated together into a multisig, and a bit vector so that you can see who signed. And together, this bit vector and this aggregated signature kind of makes up this sequencer certificate. And once we have that, then the decentralized sequencer has effectively committed to a particular transaction bundle at this slot height. And it can't change this without equivocating and without getting slashed. And it's ready now to store this in a data availability protocol, which again, because data availability is embarrassingly parallel, you can actually shard efficiently. So in this case, it can send this data and shard it across a bunch of different nodes. In this example, just 4 nodes, but in practice, many, many more nodes. And this now gets stored, and then we get a certificate back. Now, the certificate is not ordered. These transaction bundles aren't ordered in this data availability layer, and so we have to order them by putting them into Ethereum, and then also verifying that, in fact, a sufficiently large quorum of these data availability nodes actually committed to storing and serving this data. And so we store this certificate in Ethereum, and then we also verify it in a smart contract to ensure that that data is that committee has in fact committed to storing that data. Now, on the L2 node side, L2 nodes are monitoring the L1, and they're pulling data from the L1 to derive L2 blocks. And the way that this works in a world where, again, you have an LTA is you download the certificate, then you use that to fetch the data for the transactions from the data availability layer. You get back the transactions, you get back the sequencer certificate. You have to verify that sequencer certificate to make sure that 2/3 of the sequencers have signed off on that particular transaction bundle. And if they have, then you have the transactions and you can execute them, and then you can get the latest state. So pretty neat. And with that, you get kind of the derived L2 block. And we did all of this in the context of OP-Stack, and one of the really nice things that OP-Stack does is it lets full nodes actually receive these blocks before they're available on the L1. And so there's a gossip protocol, and there's a whole protocol around sharing unsafe blocks amongst all of the nodes. And what's interesting here is when you use this protocol, you end up, each full node is first receiving unsafe blocks on the P2P layer. You can verify that they've been signed off by the sequencer, but it is also later receiving what is commonly thought of as the final source of truth, which is the blocks from Ethereum. And the one thing that could happen here is that these two transaction bundles might not be the same, and if that's the case, then one of these L2 full nodes would have to reorg. And so the question then is, okay, well, what about one block finality? And this is where we can actually see slashing in action. So if this were to happen, a full node would see that, there are 2 blocks or 2 transaction bundles at the same block height that were signed off by the same decentralized sequencer. And so that means that 2/3 of sequencers must have equivocated. They must have signed 2 different transaction bundles at the same block height. And if that were to happen, again, there's a very obvious proof that you can share with the network, and you can effectively call a smart contract that would then slash these decentralized sequencers. And again, this is leveraging a lot of the same slashing code that we have already today in the L1, but it allows us to, again, bring one block finality to the L2. So in summary, this design gives us low gas fees by leveraging LTAs. Because data availability is a parallelizable problem, you can actually cut L2 transaction costs dramatically by up to actually 95%. Few people know this, but most roll-up transaction costs go to data availability, and it's usually about 95% of your transaction fee that is being spent primarily on data availability. By using an LTA, we can cut that significantly. And we realize that these types of data availability solutions are offer different guarantees in storing directly to Ethereum, and so we're doing a lot of research towards doing this in the most secure, but also in the most Ethereum-aligned way possible. Next, by leveraging kind of our experience running decentralized consensus protocols for 3.5 years, we're in a great position to create a really robust decentralized sequencer. We think that this is really great for increased uptime and for censorship resistance. And again, the design preserves one-block finality. We think that the trade-off of slowing down the native bridge a little bit is worth it for accomplishing better UX for developers and for users. And we think that in addition to making Celo an appealing chain for developers just building their dApps, we think that by offering one-block finality, it may also be an attractive place to roll up to for anybody who wants to build an L3 and they just don't want to have to think about finality, they just want to inherit one-block finality, then Celo will be a really great place to accomplish that. Cool. So what does this all mean for end users? Well, it means that hopefully there will be an Ethereum option for them as they look for places to transact, as they look for places to do payments and other real-world use cases. Hopefully this means that there'll be an Ethereum native solution that will work for their needs, and we can bump Tron from that #1 spot. And if you're at all curious and you want to see some of this in action, I would highly, highly recommend checking out Velora. You can get it at velora.xyz. If you have friends or family members that you think aren't crypto savvy enough to use MetaMask, then Velora could be a really great option for them. And then likewise, if you have folks who might already be using Opera Mini, would encourage them to check out MiniPay, which again is built into the browser, and is just like an amazing payment experience built on top of crypto rails. That's just a delight to use. That's everything I have. Thank you so much.